The cemetery sprawled
Come on,
across
keep
40
moving.
acres of
I
Michigan
hear something
farmland,
back there.
row after row
Just
of
go,
white
don't
marble
look back.
markers standing like silent soldiers in the October wind. Cassandra Brennan drove past the entrance twice before she could make herself turn in.
I'm
Her
right
father's
here
old
with you.
Ford pickup
Thank
rattled
you,
over the
dear.
gravel road
We'll
engine,
get through
knocking in
this.
a
I
rhythm
know
that
we
matched
will.
her pulse. She hadn't been here since the funeral. 5 years, 3 months, and 16 days. The truck rolled to a
What
stop
happened to your
beneath a maple
face?
tree,
We need to go.
bleeding red
I'm
leaves
fine.
onto
Just
the
give me a
hood.
second.
No, we have
Cass
to go
sat
now.
with
It's
both
not
hands
safe.
on the wheel, staring through the windshield at nothing. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman who looked older than 38. Dark skin drawn tight over sharp cheekbones. Eyes that didn't blink enough. Hair pulled back so severely it looked like she was trying to erase herself. She reached for the compass on the passenger seat. Brass casing worn smooth from decades of hands. Her father had carried it through Desert Storm. Marcus Kane had carried it through Afghanistan. Now she carried it like a stone around her neck. The cemetery was empty except for a groundskeeper on a riding mower near the far end. Cass walked the path between sections until she found the military graves. Uniform rows, uniform stones, each one marking a different version of the same story. Marcus's stone was in the third row. Simple inscription, name, rank, dates, born 1984, died 2019. The math was carved right there in granite. 35 years, not enough. She stood at the foot of the grave with the compass in her hand. The wind cut through her jacket, but she barely felt it. Somewhere overhead, a crow called out, harsh and insistent. "I came to tell you I'm sorry." Her voice sounded strange in the open air, too loud and too quiet at once. "I killed you because I made a mistake. I've been punishing myself for 5 years. Someone told me that's not what you'd want. So I'm here to say goodbye and try to stop." The words felt hollow even as she spoke them. How do you apologize to a dead man for ending his life? How do you stop carrying weight that's already carved into your bones? She knelt and placed the compass on top of the stone. The needle inside spun lazily, searching for north, but never quite settling. Like it was as lost as she was. The memory hit without warning. Always did. Marcus in the Afghan highlands handing her the compass 3 hours before the mission. His face serious in that way he got when he was trying not to show worry. "Keep this, Cass. I have a feeling this mission's going to be rough. If I don't make it, you'll need to find your way home." She'd laughed, told him he was being dramatic. Slipped the compass into her vest pocket anyway because when Marcus Kane had a feeling you listened. 8 hours later, he was bleeding out in her arms on a ridge 2,000 meters from anywhere that mattered. The fire mission she'd called had turned 3 American soldiers into red mist and shattered bone. Marcus had enough time to look at her with eyes that knew exactly what was happening. His last words came out wet and broken. She'd replayed those words 10,000 times, tried to parse meaning from the gurgle and hiss of a punctured lung. But the sounds never resolved into language, just noise, just the soundtrack to the worst thing she'd ever done. Cass stood up, her knees ached, everything ached. She'd spent 5 years in a hunting cabin in the Appalachian Mountains chopping wood and growing vegetables and not talking to anyone who might ask questions. Physical work that left her too tired to think. Isolation that meant she couldn't hurt anyone else. Her father had died 3 years ago. Heart attack while she was living in his cabin, hiding from a world she'd broken. He'd found her after the first suicide attempt. The pills drove her to the hospital without saying a word. Just sat beside her bed after they pumped her stomach and held her hand. The second attempt she'd gotten as far as putting her service pistol in her mouth. Couldn't pull the trigger. Some sniper she was. The VA therapist had used words like severe PTSD and recommended inpatient treatment. Cass had walked out mid-session and never went back. She didn't need someone to tell her she was broken. She could feel it every morning when she woke up, surprised to still be breathing. The letter had arrived a week ago, forwarded 3 times through old addresses before finding its way to the cabin. Cream-colored envelope, careful handwriting. Return address in Detroit. She pulled it from her jacket pocket now and read it again standing over Marcus's grave. "Cassandra, I'm dying. Terminal cancer. Weeks, maybe less. I need to see you before I go. Not for forgiveness, I already made peace. But I need your help with something I can't do alone. Please come. Deborah Kane." Deborah, Marcus's widow. A woman Cass had never met, never written to, never had the courage to face. And now she was dying and asking for help, and Cass didn't understand any of it. But she'd packed a bag, loaded the truck, driven 12 hours from Appalachia to Michigan because guilt was a currency she understood, and this felt like a debt coming due. The radio on the drive had been nothing but noise until she'd hit Detroit city limits. Then a news segment caught her attention. Fort Wayne military installation closed since 2005, scheduled for demolition next month. Veterans groups protesting. The anchor's voice had that practiced sympathy that meant the story was already decided. Progress marching forward, history turned to rubble. Detroit looked like a war zone. Whole neighborhoods abandoned. Buildings with empty windows staring like skull sockets. She'd seen cleaner streets in Kandahar. The VA hospital sat in a slightly better area, 6 stories of brown brick in narrow windows. Parking lot half empty, even at 3 in the afternoon. Cass sat in the truck for 20 minutes, working up the nerve to go inside. The same paralysis that used to keep her frozen outside the hospice had followed her here. But this time she forced herself to move. Forced herself through the automatic doors into air that smelled like disinfectant and floor wax, and something underneath that was probably death. The elevator took forever. 4th floor, hospice wing, nurse's station with 2 women who looked too young to be dealing with dying people all day. One pointed her toward room 312 without asking questions. The door was half open. Cass stood in the hallway and listened to voices inside. A woman's voice, weak but warm. A boy's voice, sharp with teenage irritation. And something else. Laughter. High and pure and completely out of place. She knocked. The voices stopped. "Come in." The room was small. Single bed, 1 chair, a window overlooking the parking lot. Deborah Kane lay propped up on pillows, impossibly thin beneath a blanket. She'd been beautiful once. You could still see it in the bones of her face, the shape of her eyes. Mid-50s, Cass guessed, though the cancer had aged her into something harder to measure. Beside the bed stood a boy. 16, maybe 17. Tall and lean, with his father's eyes in his mother's mouth. He stared at Cass like she'd just walked into the wrong funeral. And sitting on the edge of the bed, holding her mother's hand, was a girl. 12 years old with Down syndrome and a smile that could crack concrete. Deborah's face changed when she saw Cass. Something complicated moved through her expression. Recognition, relief, maybe fear. "Cassandra, thank you for coming." The boy took a step forward. "This is her, the one from Dad's unit, Malik Manners." He didn't move, just kept staring at Cass with eyes that were trying to decide if she was worth hating. Cass couldn't breathe right. The room was too small. The air was too thin. She'd prepared herself for a lot of things on the drive here, but not this. Not the daughter Marcus never got to watch grow up. Not the son with his face. "Mrs. Kane, I came because—" "Please call me Deborah." The woman's voice had a steadiness to it that the cancer hadn't taken. "And before you say anything, I need to ask you something." She glanced at Malik, then at the girl. "Can we speak alone?" Malik's jaw tightened. "Mom, take your sister to the cafeteria. Get her some ice cream. I'll be fine." "I want to stay." Malik. Just his name, but there was steel in it. Mother steel, the kind that meant the argument was over before it started. The girl who'd been watching the whole exchange with bright, curious eyes stood up and took Malik's hand. "Ice cream," she said. "Chocolate." He looked like he wanted to fight more, but the girl was already pulling him toward the door. He shot Cass one more look on the way out. "It said, 'I don't know who you are, but I'm watching you.'" The door closed. Silence filled the room like water rising. Deborah studied Cass for a long moment. "You look like someone who hasn't slept in 5 years." "I manage." "I doubt that." She shifted against the pillows, wincing. "Sit down, please. You're making me nervous standing there." Cass sat in the chair. It smelled like someone else's grief. "I lied to my children about how Marcus died." Deborah said it straight out, no preamble. "I told them it was an enemy sniper. Quick, clean, heroic. The Army's official letter was vague enough to let me build that story. But you were there. You know the truth." Cass felt something cold slide down her spine. "I don't understand." "He died in friendly fire. An accident. Fire mission called in by someone under stress who gave coordinates that turned out to be American positions. I read the classified report years ago. Pulled strings. Needed to know." Deborah's eyes never left Cass's face. "You were the one who called those coordinates." The room tilted. Cass gripped the arms of the chair. You knew it was me." "Yes, and I forgave you. A long time ago. But I never told Malik or Kira. I couldn't. They needed their father to be a hero, not a victim of fog of war mistakes. So I lied, and I've been lying for 5 years." Cass's throat had closed up. She couldn't swallow, couldn't speak. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. She'd come here to confess, to finally say the words out loud to someone who had a right to hear them. to offer herself up for whatever punishment a widow could give. But Deborah already knew, had known, had forgiven her without Cass even asking. Why tell me now? Deborah's expression went even more complicated, sad and determined, and something that might have been desperate. Because I'm dying, and after I'm gone, Malik will dig. He's relentless. He'll file FOIA requests, he'll find investigators, he'll piece together the truth. And when he does, he'll learn I lied. He'll lose his father and his mother's honesty in the same moment. I can't let that happen. She paused, took a breath that sounded like it cost her. I need you to help me maintain the lie. Forever. When I'm gone, if Malek asks questions, you tell him his father died heroically. You were there. You saw it. Enemy sniper. Quick death. Can you do that? The question hung in the air between them like smoke. Cass had spent 5 years rehearsing her confession. Every word of it. Every possible response. She'd imagined anger, hatred, blame. She'd imagined violence. She'd imagined a widow's tears and a widow's curse and walking away knowing she'd finally faced what she'd done. She had never imagined this. You want me to lie? I want you to give my son mercy. Truth won't bring Marcus back. It'll only destroy Malik's image of his father and me. Please. Every nerve in Cass's body was screaming. Lying was wrong. Lying was cowardice. Lying was exactly what she'd promised herself she'd never do again. She'd built her entire existence around brutal honesty, around facing things instead of hiding from them. But Deborah Kane was dying and asking for one thing, and that thing was a lie that would let her children keep their father. I can't. The words came out harder than Cass meant them to. I came here to tell the truth. I've been living with guilt for 5 years because I killed your husband. I need to confess. Deborah's face didn't change. You need absolution. I'm offering it, but not at my children's expense. Choose. Cass stood up so fast the chair scraped against linoleum. The walls were closing in. The air was gone. She had to get out of this room before she said something or did something or broke something. I need time. I have weeks, maybe less. Time is the one thing I can't give you. Cass was already at the door, hand on the handle, running again like she always ran when things got too hard or too real or too close to the center of what was broken in her. I'm sorry, I can't. She pulled the door open and nearly collided with Malik in the hallway. He'd been standing just outside, listening. His face told her he'd heard enough. What did she want? His voice was careful, too careful. She wanted to talk about your father. Tell me something about him, something from deployment. Mom never talks about that stuff. Cass could feel Deborah's eyes on her back through the open door. Could feel the weight of the choice being offered. Lie or truth, mercy or justice. Save the son or save herself. He was the best soldier I ever served with. Steady, brave. It wasn't a lie, it just wasn't all of it. Malik's eyes narrowed. How did he die, really? Mom says sniper, but she gets weird when I ask details. I can't talk about classified operations. Everyone says that. Like I'm a kid who can't handle it. The girl appeared, then moving past Malik with the unself-conscious grace that came with not knowing how to be anything but herself. She walked right up to Cass and hugged her without warning. Just wrapped small arms around Cass's waist and held on. You're pretty. Are you Daddy's friend? Cass's throat closed again. She managed to nod. Daddy's in heaven. Mommy's going there too. But it's okay. Heaven is good. The girl Kira said it like it was the simplest thing in the world. Like death was just geography. Like heaven was Detroit with better weather. Malik pulled his sister back gently. Come on, Kira, let's get that ice cream. But Kira was still looking at Cass with those bright, trusting eyes. Will you visit Mommy again? I don't know. You should. She's lonely. They left. Kira chattering about chocolate versus vanilla, Malik silent and watchful. Cass stood in the empty hallway and tried to remember how to breathe. She didn't go back into Deborah's room, didn't say goodbye, just walked to the elevator and rode down to the lobby and pushed through the doors into October air that felt like winter coming. The motel was 6 blocks away, cheap place with bars on the windows and a parking lot full of cars that had seen better decades. Cass paid cash for 3 nights and carried her single duffel bag to room 117. Inside it smelled like cigarettes and bleach. She sat on the bed and stared at the wall. Her hands were shaking. Had been shaking since she left the hospital. She pressed them flat against her thighs until they stopped. The truth was supposed to set you free. That's what people said. Confess your sins and be absolved. Face your mistakes and find peace. But Deborah hadn't wanted her truth. Deborah wanted her lie. And Malik wanted his father to be a hero, not a casualty of American fire called in by a soldier who'd been awake for 16 hours and working from outdated grid coordinates and made a mistake that turned human beings into hamburger. Cass pulled off her boots and lay back on the mattress. The ceiling had a water stain in the shape of something that might have been a map or might have been nothing. She stared at it until the light changed and evening turned the room gray. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Detroit area code. She didn't answer. It buzzed again. Voicemail notification. She listened to the message. Malik's voice. "This is Malik Kane. My mom gave me your number. I need to talk to you. It's important. Call me back." Cass deleted the message, turned off the phone, lay in the dark and tried not to think about the way Kira had hugged her, the way Malik had Marcus's eyes, the way Deborah had looked at her like she was the solution to a problem instead of the cause of one. Sleep didn't come. It never did. Not without pharmaceutical help, and she'd stopped taking pills after the first attempt. Couldn't trust herself with anything that might make the next one easier. Around midnight, she got up and drove back to the cemetery. The gates were closed, but she parked outside and walked in. The groundskeeper was long gone. She had the dead all to herself. Marcus's grave looked different in moonlight. The marble caught the glow and held it. The compass was still there, on top of the stone. She'd expected someone to take it, groundskeeper or visitor or wind. But it sat exactly where she'd left it. She picked it up. The needle spun, searching, north, south, east, west. Never settling, never sure. "You told me to keep this to find my way home." Her voice was quieter now, almost a whisper. "But I don't know which direction is right. Tell Malik the truth and destroy him, or lie and save him? What would you want?" The wind picked up, moved through the trees with a sound like breathing. The compass needle spun faster, then slower, then stopped, pointing back toward the hospital. Cass stood there for a long time holding the compass and watching the direction it showed her. North, back to Detroit. Back to Deborah and Malik and Kira. Back to the choice she didn't know how to make. When she finally left, she didn't take the compass with her. Left it on the stone like an offering. Like a question still waiting for an answer. The drive back to the motel took 10 minutes. She parked in front of her room and sat in the truck with the engine running. Radio playing low. Some talk show host arguing with callers about nothing that mattered. Tomorrow she would have to decide. Truth or lie. Justice or mercy. The woman she'd been for 5 years, or someone new she didn't know how to be. But tonight she was just tired. Bone deep, soul sick tired. The kind of tired that made you understand why some people decided to stop fighting. She turned off the engine, got out, locked the door. Walked to her room on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. Inside, she sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out the photograph she kept in her wallet. Marcus and her on a firing range at Fort Benning. Both of them grinning like idiots. She'd just qualified expert on the M24. He'd bought her a beer after, told her she was the best natural shooter he'd ever trained. 3 years later, she'd put rounds on his position and turned him into a memory. She put the photo away, lay down fully dressed, stared at the water stain on the ceiling until her eyes burned. Somewhere in Detroit, a woman was dying and asking for mercy in the shape of a lie. Somewhere in Detroit, a boy was trying to understand how his father died. Somewhere in Detroit, a girl believed in heaven and thought her daddy was watching. And Cassandra Brennan, who had spent 5 years punishing herself for a truth she couldn't escape, had to decide if mercy was more important than honesty. The answer should have been simple. Tell the truth. Always tell the truth. That's what she'd believed. That's what her father had taught her. That's what Marcus would have wanted. Except she didn't know what Marcus would have wanted. Didn't know if he'd want his son to carry the knowledge that American soldiers had killed him by accident. Didn't know if he'd want his daughter's last memories of her mother tainted by the revelation of a 5-year lie. All she knew was that the compass had pointed back toward the hospital, and that sometimes the hardest thing in the world was knowing which direction home actually was. Cass woke at dawn with her phone vibrating against the nightstand. 3 missed calls, all from the same Detroit number. She'd turned the phone back on out of habit, the kind soldiers developed when being unreachable meant people died. She listened to the voicemail on speaker while pulling on her boots. "Miss Brennan, this is Malik Kane. I know you talked to my mom yesterday. I know she asked you something. I need to know what. My mom's dying and she's keeping secrets and I just can't do this if she's lying to me. Please call me back." His voice cracked on the last word. 17 years old and trying to sound like a man and failing right at the end. Cass deleted the message, stood up, looked at herself in the mirror above the sink. Same face as yesterday. Same eyes that had seen too much. Same stranger staring back. She was halfway to the door when the knock came. She opened it to find Malik standing in the motel parking lot holding two paper coffee cups. He wore the same clothes as yesterday, jeans, and a hoodie with a Detroit Lions logo. Dark circles under his eyes said he hadn't slept either. "How did you find me? There's only 3 motels near the hospital that don't rent by the hour." He held out one of the cups. "Figured you'd pick the cheapest one?" Cass took the coffee. It was terrible. Gas station quality, burned and weak. She drank it anyway. Malik glanced past her into the room. "Can I come in?" "No." "Fair." He leaned against the railing. Morning light caught the side of his face, and for a second Cass saw Marcus so clearly it hurt. Same angle of jaw, same way of holding his shoulders like he was ready to carry weight. "My mom asked you to lie to me, didn't she?" Cass kept her expression neutral. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. She's been doing it my whole life. Smoothing over the hard parts, making things easier. She thinks I can't handle the truth." He looked at her directly. "How did my dad really die?" The question hung in the cold air between them. Cass could give him the lie Deborah wanted. Enemy sniper, quick and clean, heroic end. She could give him the truth she'd been carrying. Friendly fire American coordinates, her mistake. Or she could give him nothing. "I can't talk about classified operations." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." Malik's jaw tightened. He looked like he wanted to argue more, but something in Cass's face must have told him it wouldn't work. He set his coffee cup on the railing. "My mom has maybe 2 weeks. The doctors won't say it out loud, but I can read charts. I've been reading them since I was 12. She's bleeding internally now. The cancer's in her liver, her lungs, her spine. Every day she's a little less here." His voice stayed steady, but his hands shook. "I don't want to spend her last days fighting about secrets, but I need to know who my father was. Not the story, the truth." "Is that too much to ask?" Cass thought about Marcus handing her the compass. Thought about his last words that she still couldn't decipher. Thought about the way Deborah had looked at her yesterday, dying woman asking for one final kindness. "Yes," she said. "Sometimes it is." Malik stared at her for a long moment. Then he picked up his coffee and walked away without another word. Cass watched him cross the parking lot and get into an old Honda Civic that had seen better years. He sat in the driver's seat for a while, not starting the engine, just sitting there. Then he drove off. She went inside and sat on the bed and tried to figure out what she was doing in Detroit, what she thought would happen when she came here, what any of this solved. Her phone rang again. Different number this time. Local, but not one she recognized. "Miss Brennan," woman's voice. Professional. "This is Linda Jackson. I'm Deborah Kane's sister. She'd like to see you again." "Are you available this morning?" Cass almost said no. Almost hung up and got in her truck and drove back to Appalachia, where the only person she could hurt was herself. "I'll be there in an hour." The hospital looked different in daylight. Less like a holding cell for the dying, more like just another government building, slowly falling apart. Cass took the stairs instead of the elevator. Needed the time to prepare herself for whatever came next. Linda Jackson met her outside room 312, mid-40s, wearing Scrubs nurse's badge clipped to her pocket. She had Deborah's eyes, but harder. Eyes that had seen suffering as a job instead of a personal catastrophe. "She's weaker today," Linda said. "The morphine helps with pain, but makes her confused sometimes. If she doesn't make sense, don't push." "Where's Malik?" "Took Kira to school. He'll be back this afternoon." Linda studied Cass with the same evaluation Malik had used, trying to figure out what kind of person she was, whether she could be trusted. "My sister told me what she asked you to do, the lie she wants you to tell. And I think she's wrong, but she's dying, and I'm not going to spend her last days arguing about it." Linda opened the door. "She's waiting." Deborah looked smaller than yesterday, more transparent, like the cancer was erasing her one cell at a time, but her eyes were clear when they found Cass. "You came back. Your sister called." "I asked her to." Deborah shifted against the pillows with a wince that said the morphine wasn't helping enough. "I need to tell you something. About Marcus. About what happened that day." Cass's chest tightened. "I know what happened." "No. You know the official story. Fire mission, wrong coordinates, 3 KIA. But you don't know why Marcus was in that position. Why he insisted you take the northern spotting location." Deborah reached for a folder on the bedside table. Linda handed it to her. "I have something from the Army investigation. They gave it to me years ago when I pushed for answers. She pulled out a single page. Photocopied document, mostly redacted, but one paragraph visible. Cass took it and read. Preliminary findings suggest Sergeant Kane repositioned prior to fire mission, despite being ordered to maintain original coordinates. Analysis of blast pattern indicates Kane's position at time of strike was approximately 20 meters south of designated overwatch point. Reason for repositioning remains unclear. Cass read it 3 times. The words didn't change. He moved, she said. He wasn't where he was supposed to be. That's what the report says, and I've spent 5 years wondering why. Why would Marcus move from a safer position to one that put him directly in the blast radius? Deborah's voice was getting weaker. The conversation was costing her. I think he knew something, saw something, made a choice. The room felt too small again. Cass handed the paper back. What does this have to do with what you asked me yesterday? Everything. Because if Marcus moved deliberately, if he chose to be in that position, then maybe his death wasn't an accident. Maybe it was something else. And if that's true, Malik deserves to know his father died making a choice not caught in someone else's mistake. Cass sat down hard in the chair. Her mind was racing through the possibilities. Marcus repositioning. Marcus in the blast radius when he should have been clear. Marcus's last words that she couldn't understand. You're saying he killed himself. I'm saying I don't know, and I need help finding out. Marcus left personal effects, gear notebooks, things the Army confiscated for the investigation. They were supposed to return them, but they never did. I've been asking for 5 years. Nothing but bureaucratic runaround. Deborah looked at Cass with an intensity that seemed impossible for someone so close to death. You know how the system works? You have contacts, please. Help me get his things back before I die. There might be something there, some answer. It was a trap and Cass knew it. Get involved, start investigating open doors that had been sealed for good reasons. Every instinct told her to walk away, but the look in Deborah's eyes was the same look Marcus used to get before difficult missions. Determination mixed with fear, mixed with absolute certainty that the risk was worth it. Where would his effects be? Fort Wayne, the old base. They used it for storage after it closed. Everything from units deployed out of Michigan went there. Marcus's footlocker should be in Building 7. The base is condemned. They're tearing it down next month. I know, which means if we don't get his things now, they'll be destroyed with everything else. Deborah's breathing was labored. Linda moved closer, checking the monitors. Please, Cassandra, I don't have time to wait for proper channels. I need someone who could just go get them. You're asking me to break into a federal facility. I'm asking you to help a dying woman get her husband's belongings back. How you do it is up to you. Linda touched Deborah's shoulder. That's enough. You need to rest. Deborah ignored her sister. Malik knows where the base is. He's been researching it for a school project. He can help, but he can't do this alone. He needs you. The manipulation was obvious. Use the son to leverage the guilt. Get Cass invested in helping the boy so she'd be more likely to accept the lie Deborah wanted. It was transparent and it was working anyway. I'll think about it. Don't think too long. I don't have that kind of time. Cass left before the conversation could go anywhere else. Linda followed her into the hallway. She's stronger than she looks, Linda said, but not by much. Whatever you're going to do it soon. Why are you helping her with this? Because she's my sister and she's dying. And if getting her husband's old notebook or whatever gives her peace, I'm not going to stand in the way. Linda crossed her arms. But I want you to know something. That boy Malik, he's all I'll have left of her when she's gone. Kira too, but Malik's the one who'll need watching. He's angry and smart and looking for something to punch. Don't make him worse. I'm not trying to make anyone anything. Good, keep it that way. Cass took the stairs down and pushed through the lobby doors into November air that felt like winter's advance guard. Her truck was where she'd left it. She sat inside with the engine off and thought about Marcus repositioning himself. Thought about deliberate choices and blast radiuses and last words that didn't make sense. Her phone buzzed. Text from the number Malik had called from earlier. Mom told you about Fort Wayne. I can help. Meet me at the corner of Michigan and Trumbull at noon. She shouldn't go. Should get in the truck and drive back to the mountains and let the Kane family handle their own grief. She'd done enough damage to these people. Getting more involved would only make things worse. But she texted back anyway. I'll be there. The corner of Michigan and Trumbull was in the shadow of what used to be a Tiger Stadium. The ballpark was gone now, torn down years ago, replaced by a field where local kids played pickup games. Malik's Honda was parked at a meter. He leaned against the hood, watching traffic. Cass pulled up beside him. He got in the passenger seat without being asked. Fort Wayne's 20 minutes north, he said. I've got maps of the base layout, building directory, even old security patrol routes from when it was active. How did you get all that? Internet. Most bases have documentation online if you know where to look. Building 7 is on the east side. Warehouse storage. Chain link fence, but it's been cut in a dozen places by scrappers. We can walk right in. Cass studied him. You've been planning this? For 6 months, since Mom first told me about Dad's stuff being in storage. I was going to do it alone, but she said it was too dangerous. He looked at her directly. She said I should wait until you got here. She was setting this up. Yeah, she's good at that. There was something in his voice that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite admiration. Are we going or not? Cass put the truck in gear. We're going. Fort Wayne sat on 75 acres of land that had been training soldiers since before World War I. The main gate was chained shut, warning signs about condemned property and federal trespassing. But Malik was right about the fence. 30 yards down, someone had cut a section wide enough to drive a car through. They parked in the shadow of Building 3 and walked toward the eastern section. The base looked like a movie set for the end of the world. Broken windows, graffiti, nature reclaiming concrete and asphalt one weed at a time. In the distance, demolition equipment sat idle, waiting for the day someone gave the order to erase history. Building 7 was a long warehouse with a loading dock and metal doors secured by chains and padlocks. Malik pulled bolt cutters from his backpack. You came prepared. I'm my mother's son. He cut through the chain in 3 strikes. The lock fell away. The door opened with a scream of metal on metal. Inside was darkness and dust and the smell of slow decay. Cass pulled a flashlight from her jacket. The beam cut through shadows, revealing rows of metal shelving stacked with footlockers, crates, pallets of equipment wrapped in plastic. Malik had a smaller light. Dad's unit was 3rd Battalion, 75th Regiment. Storage should be alphabetical by unit, then by name. This way. They walked through the warehouse, stepping over debris and animal droppings. The beam of Cass's flashlight caught things she tried not to look at too closely. Evidence of people living here. Homeless or addicts or both. The kind of people who used abandoned federal buildings as shelter because they had nowhere else to go. Malik stopped at a section marked with faded stenciling. 3rd Battalion, Rangers. He ran his light along the shelves until he found what he was looking for. Here, Kane Marcus. The footlocker was standard issue. Olive drab metal combination lock. Malik tried his father's birth year. Didn't work. Tried his own birthday. The lock clicked open. He lifted the lid slowly like he was afraid of what might be inside. Cass moved closer, shining her light into the locker. Marcus's uniform, boots, personal gear, a watch that had stopped at 10:43, photographs in a plastic bag, letters, and at the bottom wrapped in canvas, a folder marked with red tape. Malik reached for it. Cass caught his wrist. Don't. Red tape means classified. It's my dad's stuff. It's federal property marked classified. If you open that, you're violating espionage laws. I don't care. You should. Cass's grip tightened. Your mom asked me to help you get his personal effects, not to help you commit federal crimes. Malik jerked his hand free. You sound like everyone else. Rules and regulations and proper channels. My dad died and the Army took his things and never gave them back. And now my mom's dying and you want me to follow procedure? I want you to think about consequences. The consequence is I finally know the truth about how my father died. That's worth the risk. He grabbed the folder before Cass could stop him. Pulled it out of the locker. Unwrapped the canvas. Inside were pages, handwritten notes. Marcus's handwriting. Malik read by flashlight, his lips moving slightly. Cass watched his expression change. Confusion to understanding to something that looked like horror. What does it say? He handed her the folder without speaking. Cass read. It was dated the day before Marcus died. Mission notes, tactical observations, and at the bottom in Marcus's careful script, if I don't make it back, whoever reads this needs to know. Saw enemy spotter targeting our overwatch position, Cass, Brennan, and me on elevated ridge. Spotter had laser on us. Calculated if I call fire mission on our coordinates, it takes out Spotter and his team, collateral damage to our position. But Cass survives if she's north sector, like I positioned her. I take the hit. Acceptable trade. Save our best sniper, eliminate high-value target. If this goes wrong, tell command it was my decision. Don't blame Cass. She doesn't know what I'm doing. Cass read it twice, 3 times. The words didn't change. Marcus had called the fire mission on his own position, deliberately. He'd positioned her in the safe zone and put himself in the kill radius and made a choice. She hadn't failed. He'd succeeded. 5 years of guilt. 5 years of carrying the weight of 3 deaths. And it had been Marcus's plan all along. He killed himself to save you. Malik's voice sounded hollow. He saw you were about to get hit, and he sacrificed himself and the other 2 guys and called in fire on his own people. He eliminated a high-value target by using American soldiers as bait, including himself. Malik's hands were shaking. The folder rattled. How is that heroic? How is that anything except suicide? It's tactical judgment under combat conditions. It's murder. The word hung in the dusty air. Cass wanted to argue, wanted to defend Marcus's choice, wanted to explain the calculations that go into split-second decisions when lives are at stake and there's no good option, only less terrible ones. But before she could speak, headlights swept through the warehouse windows. A vehicle pulling up outside. Engine cutting off. Doors opening. Cass killed her flashlight, grabbed Malik's arm and pulled him down behind the shelving. His light went out. Voices outside. Multiple people. Heavy footsteps on the loading dock. Building 7 right. Man's voice. Military cadence. Affirmative. Kane's footlocker should be in 3rd Battalion section. The doors opened. Beams from high-powered flashlights cut through the darkness. Cass counted 3 people, maybe 4, moving with tactical precision. She pulled Malik deeper into the shadows, pressed a finger to her lips. He nodded, eyes wide. The footsteps came closer. Lights sweeping methodically through the aisles. Contact, 3rd Battalion section. Footlockers open. A woman's voice this time. Calm, authoritative. Check for documents, red tape folder specifically. Cass's mind raced. These weren't base security. Security didn't move like that. Didn't know exactly which locker to check. Didn't arrive 30 seconds after someone opened classified materials. Someone had been watching. Waiting. Folder's gone. Locker's been searched. Then they're still in the building. Fan out. Find them. Malik's breathing was too loud. Cass clamped a hand over his mouth. Drew him further back into the darkness. They moved between rows of shelving, trying to put distance between themselves and the search team. A flashlight beam swept past them, 6 feet away, close enough to hear the searcher's radio click. North section clear. Keep looking. They can't have gone far. Cass spotted a side door near the back wall. Emergency exit. She pulled Malik toward it, moving as quietly as possible. Every footstep sounded like thunder. Every breath felt like a scream. They reached the door. Cass tried the handle. Locked. Footsteps behind them. Getting closer. Movement. Northwest corner. Cass looked around desperately. No other exits. No windows low enough to reach. Just shelving and shadows and time running out. Then she saw it. Ventilation shaft. 3 feet square. Access panel hanging loose. She boosted Malik up. He scrambled inside. She followed, pulling herself into the shaft just as flashlight beams converged on their position. The shaft was barely wide enough to crawl through. Dust thick enough to choke on. Malik ahead of her, moving on hands and knees. Cass behind him, pulling the access panel closed as quietly as she could. Voices below them now, directly below. Doors locked. They didn't come this way. Then where are they? Silence. Then the woman's voice again. Closer now. Check the ventilation. Cass's heart stopped. She grabbed Malik's ankle and squeezed. He froze. Below them, someone dragged something heavy across the floor, using it to climb. Reaching for the vent, Cass made a decision. She kicked the access panel hard. It flew off and hit whoever was climbing. Sound of impact. Cursing. Go! She hissed at Malik. Move! They crawled faster. The shaft branched. Malik took the left path. Cass followed. Behind them, someone else was in the shaft now. Heavier. Slower. But coming. The shaft dead-ended at another access panel. Malik kicked it open and dropped through. Cass followed, landing in what looked like an office. Desks and filing cabinets and windows looking out on the parking lot. Their truck was visible through the glass, 50 yards away. Run, Cass said. They ran, out the office door, down a hallway, through a break room with shattered vending machines. Out a side entrance into November cold. The truck was too far. They wouldn't make it before the search team came out. Cass looked around for options. There, a drainage culvert, large enough to hide in. She grabbed Malik and pulled him toward it. They dropped into the culvert just as the warehouse doors opened, pressed themselves against the concrete, held their breath. The search team emerged. 4 people, 3 men in tactical gear. and a woman in an officer's uniform. Even in the dim light, Cass recognized the rank insignia. Lieutenant Colonel. The woman pulled out a phone, made a call. "They're in the wind. Yes, ma'am. They have the folder. I understand. We'll find them." She hung up, turned to her team. "Brennan and the Kane boy. I want them located within the hour, and I want that document back, whatever it takes." They split up, two heading toward the vehicle entrance, two staying to search the immediate area. Cass and Malik waited in the culvert for 20 minutes. Long enough for the cold to seep through their clothes, long enough for the search team to move on. When they finally climbed out and made it to the truck, Cass's hands were numb. She fumbled with the keys, got the engine started, drove out through the cut fence without headlights until they were a mile away. Malik stared at the folder in his lap. Who were those people? Military, probably sent to recover classified materials. How did they know we were there? I don't know, but Cass had suspicions. Someone had been monitoring the base, watching for anyone trying to access Marcus's effects. Someone who wanted that folder to stay buried. Malik opened it again, read Marcus's words by the dashboard lights. "This changes everything. My dad wasn't a victim. He was a suicide bomber who used American soldiers as weapons. He made a tactical decision. He killed 2 other people without asking them. That's not tactics. That's murder." Malik's voice cracked again. "My mom spent 5 years lying to me about how he died, and it turns out the truth is worse than anything she could have made up." Cass didn't have an answer for that. Didn't have words that would make any of this better. They drove in silence back toward the hospital. But 2 blocks away, Cass saw the same military vehicle from Fort Wayne parked outside the emergency entrance. She kept driving, pulled into a gas station 3 blocks down. "We can't go back to the hospital," she said. "They'll be watching. My mom's in there. My sister. I know. But if we go back now, they'll arrest us. Take the folder, and you'll never know what else your father wrote." Malik looked at her. "What else could there be?" "I don't know, but that officer, she was serious about getting this back, which means there's something in here they don't want anyone to see." Her phone rang. "Hospital number." She answered. "Miss Brennan," Linda's voice, tight with stress. "There are MPs here asking about Malik. They say he broke into federal property and stole classified documents. They're threatening to search Deborah's room." "Where are you?" "We're safe." "That's not an answer. These people are serious. They have warrants. Tell them Malik's with me. Tell them we'll cooperate. But we need time." "Time for what?" "To figure out what Marcus Kane knew that got him killed." She hung up, looked at Malik. "We need somewhere to go. Somewhere they won't look." Malik thought for a moment, then pulled out his phone and made a call. "Uncle Jerome, it's Malik. I need a favor." 20 minutes later, they pulled up to a house in a neighborhood that looked like it was holding on by sheer stubbornness. Small yards, chain-link fences. Cars that ran but wouldn't win any beauty contests. A man came out to meet them, late 50s gray in his beard, wearing coveralls with motor oil stains. Jerome Jackson, Deborah's brother-in-law. He looked at Malik. "Your mom know you're here?" "Not exactly." "Figured." He glanced at Cass. "You the army lady causing all the trouble." "That's me." "Well, get inside before someone sees you standing in my driveway like fugitives." The house was small, but warm. Jerome's wife had died 3 years ago. He lived alone now, worked as a mechanic, minded his own business until family needed him. He sat them at the kitchen table and made coffee. Real coffee, not the gas station garbage Cass had been drinking. "Linda called me," he said. "Told me MPs are looking for you. Told me you broke into Fort Wayne and stole something. Want to tell me your side?" Malik showed him the folder, explained what they'd found. Jerome read Marcus's notes carefully. When he finished, he set the folder down and rubbed his face. "Lord have mercy. Marcus did that." "You knew him?" Cass asked. "Met him a few times. Seemed like good man. Loved Deborah. Loved his kids." Jerome looked at Malik. "Your daddy made a hard choice in a hard place. Don't make it more than that. He killed 2 people. He saved one and eliminated an enemy. That's what soldiers do." Jerome pushed the folder back across the table. "Question is, what are you going to do now MPs ain't going to stop looking? And whatever's in that folder, somebody wants it bad enough to send officers after 2 civilians." Cass picked up the folder. Looked through it again. There had to be more. Some piece they were missing. Some reason the Army wanted this buried so deep. Then she saw it, on the back of the last page. Small handwriting, almost a footnote. If anything happens to me, someone needs to look at Firebase Atlas supply manifest from July through September 2019. Numbers don't match. Someone's running something through our logistics chain. I reported it to command. Colonel Harmon told me to drop it. I didn't. That's probably why I'm writing this. Cass showed it to Malik. Did your father mention Colonel Harmon to your mother? I don't know. We could call her. No phone calls. They'll be monitoring her room. Cass stood up. Jerome, can we stay here tonight? You can stay as long as you need, but those MPs are going to find you eventually. Might want to figure out what you're doing before they do. Cass looked at the words Marcus had written. Supply manifests. Numbers that don't match. Someone running something through logistics. And a colonel who told him to drop it. 5 years ago, Marcus Kane had found evidence of something wrong. And 2 months later, he was dead. Maybe not from tactical judgment. Maybe from something else entirely. She looked at Malik. What do you know about your father's deployment before he died? Did he mention anything unusual? Just that he'd be home for my birthday in October. He died in September. Malik's voice was flat. Why? Because I think your father didn't die in a tactical decision. I think he died because he knew something someone wanted buried. The words hung in Jerome's kitchen like smoke. Outside evening was turning into night. Somewhere in Detroit, MPs were searching. Somewhere in a hospital room, Deborah Kane was dying without knowing her son was in trouble. And somewhere in a classified file or a supply manifest or a colonel's office, there was an answer to why Marcus Kane had really died. Cass pulled out her phone, started searching for anything she could find about Firebase Atlas, about supply irregularities, about Colonel Harmon. She had a feeling they were about to find something the Army had spent 5 years making sure nobody ever found, and that finding it was going to cost them everything. Jerome's spare bedroom smelled like old books and mothballs. Cass sat on the edge of the bed with Marcus's folder open in her lap while Malik paced by the window. Firebase Atlas was a forward operating base in Kunar Province, she said, reading from search results on her phone. Established 2017, decommissioned 2020, 300 personnel at peak operation. Primary mission was counterinsurgency and logistics support for special operations units in the region. What kind of logistics? Everything. Food, ammunition, medical supplies, fuel. All the stuff that keeps soldiers alive moves through bases like Atlas, as she scrolled down. According to this, Colonel Thomas Harmon was the commanding officer from 2018 to 2020, currently assigned to Pentagon Logistics Oversight, promoted to Brigadier General last year. Malik stopped pacing. So the guy my dad reported to is now a general? Doesn't that seem convenient? Or expected? Good officers get promoted. But Cass's instincts said otherwise. Marcus had written that the numbers didn't match, that someone was running something through the supply chain, and when he'd reported it, he'd been told to drop it. 2 months later, he was dead. We need to see those supply manifests, Malik said. They're classified, archived somewhere we can't access. Then what do we do? Cass thought about it. Thought about the lieutenant colonel who chased them at Fort Wayne. Thought about the MPs at the hospital. Thought about how much effort the Army was putting into recovering one dead soldier's notebook. We use what we have. Marcus wrote this down because he thought it mattered. He wanted someone to find it. We make sure the right people see it. Who are the right people? I don't know yet, she closed the folder. But first we need to deal with the immediate problem. Those MPs aren't going away, and your mother needs to know you're safe. Malik's expression shifted, guilt replacing anger. She's probably terrified. Probably, which is why we're going to fix this tonight. Jerome knocked on the door and entered carrying plates of food. Fried chicken greens, cornbread. Real food, the kind that reminded you that human beings needed more than survival. Eat, he said. Can't think on an empty stomach. They ate in the kitchen while Jerome watched the local news. Nothing about Fort Wayne. Nothing about missing teenagers or federal investigations. Just the usual litany of Detroit's struggles. Crime and corruption and politicians making promises they wouldn't keep. When the news ended, Jerome turned off the TV and looked at them. You two need to understand something. Whatever Marcus found, whatever he wrote in that notebook, it got him killed. And now you're walking that same path. You sure you want to keep going? We don't have a choice, Malik said. There's always a choice. You could give that folder to the MPs. Tell them you didn't read it. Go back to your mother and let the Army handle their own mess. And let them bury whatever my dad died for. Better buried than you following him into the ground. Jerome's voice was gentle but firm. I know you want justice. I know you want your daddy's name cleared. But some fights you can't win. Some truths are too dangerous to speak. Cass set down her fork. You think we should give up? I think you should stay alive. And I think that boy's mother deserves to die with her son beside her, not in federal custody. The words hit hard because they were true. Deborah had weeks at most. Malik should be spending that time with her, not running from MPs and chasing conspiracies. But giving up meant Marcus's death stayed buried. Meant whoever had covered it up won. Meant the truth died with Deborah. Malik looked at Cass. What do you think? She thought about the 5 years she'd spent carrying guilt for something that wasn't her fault. Thought about how the truth had been right there in Marcus's notes, and she'd never known because someone had made sure she never would. I think we finish what your father started, but we do it smart. Jerome sighed. Smart would be calling a lawyer. Smart would be going through proper channels. Proper channels got Marcus killed. You don't know that. I know enough. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Jerome stood and cleared the plates. You're gonna do what you're gonna do. I can see that. But at least call Linda. Let her know Malik's safe so she can tell Deborah. That woman doesn't deserve to die thinking her son's in danger. Cass pulled out her phone. Jerome was right about that much. Linda answered on the first ring. Where is he? Safe. With me. We need time to figure some things out. The MPs are still here. They want to talk to him. They say what he took from Fort Wayne is classified national security material. It's his father's personal notebook, with classified operational details. Their words, not mine. Linda's voice dropped. Deborah's asking for him. She's worse tonight. The morphine's not holding. She knows something's wrong. Guilt twisted in Cass's chest. Can you tell her he's okay, that he'll come see her tomorrow? Will he? Yes. Then I'll tell her. But Cassandra, whatever you're doing, do it fast. My sister doesn't have much time left. The call ended. Cass looked at Malik. We go back to the hospital tomorrow morning. Deal with the MPs. Get you back to your mother. And the folder? We make copies first. Send them to people who can't be silenced. Like who? Cass thought about it. Journalists, congressional oversight committees, inspector general offices. Somewhere in the machinery of government, there had to be people who still cared about dead soldiers and supply chain fraud. But before she could answer, headlights swept across the front windows. Jerome looked outside and cursed softly. Police car, unmarked, but I know the look. Cass moved to the window. Black sedan, 2 people inside, one of them the lieutenant colonel from Fort Wayne. Back door, Jerome said. Through the kitchen. My truck's in the alley. Keys are in it. We can't take your truck. You can and you will. Go. Now. Malik grabbed the folder. Cass grabbed her jacket. They were moving toward the kitchen when the knock came at the front door, hard and official. Jerome Jackson, this is Lieutenant Colonel Reeves, U.S. Army. Open the door. Jerome looked at Cass and Malik and jerked his head toward the back. Then he walked to the front door and opened it. Evening, Colonel. Can I help you? Cass and Malik slipped through the kitchen and out the back door while Reeves's voice carried through the house. We're looking for Malik Kane. We have reason to believe he's here. Don't know any Malik Kane. His aunt said he might have come to you. His aunt's mistaken. Jerome's truck was a battered F-150 with rust on the wheel wells and an engine that sounded like it was held together by prayer. Cass got behind the wheel. Malik climbed in the passenger side with the folder clutched to his chest. The engine started on the third try. Cass drove down the alley without headlights, watching the rearview mirror for pursuit. Nothing yet. Jerome was buying them time. Where are we going? Malik asked. Somewhere they won't look. She drove through Detroit's east side, taking random turns, doubling back, making sure no one followed. The city looked different at night, emptier, like a stage set after the audience had left. They ended up at a 24-hour copy shop in a strip mall next to a laundromat and a check-cashing place. The kind of neighborhood where people minded their own business because everyone had something they didn't want noticed. Cass paid cash for copies of every page in Marcus's folder, made 3 sets. Put them in separate envelopes. Who are you sending them to? Malik asked. Anyone who might care. She addressed one to the Detroit Free Press, one to the Department of Defense Inspector General, one to the Senate Armed Services Committee. They dropped the envelopes in 3 different mailboxes across the city. By the time they finished, it was past midnight, and Malik was falling asleep in the passenger seat. Cass found a motel, different from the one she'd stayed in before, paid cash again, got a room on the ground floor with a view of the parking lot and the exit. Inside, Malik collapsed on one of the beds without taking his shoes off. What happens now? Now we sleep. Tomorrow we face whatever comes. I'm scared. It was the first time he'd admitted it. The anger and bravado had carried him this far, but underneath was a 16-year-old kid who'd lost his father and was losing his mother and didn't know how to carry that weight. Me too, Cass said. How do you deal with it being scared all the time? She thought about the 5 years in the cabin, the 2 suicide attempts, the nights when the fear was so thick she couldn't breathe. Badly. I deal with it badly. Malik almost smiled. At least you're honest. Your father taught me that. Be honest even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. He wasn't honest with me. He let me think he died a hero. Maybe he was both, a hero and a human, someone who made hard choices that looked like mistakes from certain angles. Cass sat on the other bed. The thing about your father, he always believed there were acceptable losses, calculated risks worth taking. I hated that about him sometimes, but I understood it too. Did you love him? The question caught her off guard. Like a brother, like family, not the other way. Good. Would have been weird otherwise. They sat in silence for a while. Eventually, Malik's breathing evened out. He was asleep. Cass lay back and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow they'd go back to the hospital, face the MPs, deal with whatever consequences came from stealing classified materials and running from federal officers. But tonight she had copies of Marcus's notes in the mail. Proof that he'd found something worth dying for. Proof that his death might have been more than tactical miscalculation. She thought about Deborah's request, the lie she wanted Cass to tell, enemy sniper, quick and clean, heroic end. But the truth was so much more complicated. Marcus had made a choice. Maybe to save Cass. Maybe to eliminate a target. Maybe because he knew too much about supply chain corruption and needed to look like a combat casualty instead of a murder. The truth deserved to be told, even if it destroyed the simple story Deborah wanted for her children. Cass finally slept around 3. Woke at dawn to her phone buzzing. Unknown number. She answered anyway. Sergeant Brennan? Woman's voice. The lieutenant colonel from Fort Wayne. This is Diana Reeves. We need to talk. I don't have anything to say to you. You have classified materials that don't belong to you. That's a federal crime, but I'm willing to discuss alternatives if you're willing to listen. What kind of alternatives? Meet me, alone. We can work something out that doesn't end with you and Leavenworth and the Kane boy in juvenile detention. Cass looked at Malik, still asleep on the other bed. Where? Hart Plaza. 9 a.m. Come alone and bring the folder. The call ended. Cass knew it was a trap, knew walking into it was probably the stupidest thing she could do, but she also knew that running only bought time, not solutions. She woke Malik, told him about the call. You can't go alone, he said. She'll arrest you. Probably, but maybe I can make a deal. Get you clear in exchange for the folder. We already sent copies. She doesn't know that. You'd sacrifice yourself for me. Cass thought about Marcus calling fire on his own position, thought about acceptable losses and calculated risks. Your father would, so yeah, I would. That's stupid. Probably. They drove to the hospital instead of Hart Plaza, pulled into the parking lot at 8:30. The same military vehicle from yesterday was gone. Good sign or trap, Cass couldn't tell. Go see your mother, she said. Tell her everything. The folder, what we found, all of it. She deserves the truth before she dies. What about you? I'm going to meet Reeves, see what she wants. I'm coming with you. No, you're staying with your family. That's an order. Malik looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Cass's face stopped him. Don't get yourself killed over this. I'll try not to. He got out of the truck, walked toward the hospital entrance, stopped and looked back. Thank you for helping me find the truth. Then he was gone. Cass drove to Hart Plaza alone. The plaza was mostly empty this early. A few joggers, a homeless man sleeping on a bench, and standing by the fountain wearing civilian clothes this time, Lieutenant Colonel Diana Reeves. Cass parked and walked over. Reeves was in her 40s. Black woman with gray starting at her temples and eyes that had seen things they didn't talk about in polite company. You came, Reeves said. You made it sound important. It is. Do you have the folder? Safe, along with copies that have already been mailed to journalists and oversight committees. Reeves's expression didn't change. Smart, but ultimately pointless. Those agencies will bury it just like we did. National security, ongoing operations, all the usual excuses. Then why are you here? To make you understand what you're dealing with. Marcus Kane stumbled onto something he shouldn't have seen. Weapons and equipment being diverted from Firebase Atlas to off-book operations. Black budget stuff. Deniable missions that saved American lives but looked bad on paper. When he reported it, he signed his death warrant. Cass felt something cold settle in her stomach. You're saying he was murdered. I'm saying he made himself a liability, and in war liabilities get eliminated. The fire mission he called wasn't tactical genius. It was suicide. He knew what he'd found, knew it would get him killed. So he went out on his own terms, saving you in the process, making it look like combat casualties instead of assassination. That's insane. That's military intelligence. Reeves stepped closer. You want to know why we're chasing you so hard? Because Marcus's notes name names, officers who were involved, contractors who facilitated. If this gets out, it's not just embarrassment. It's criminal charges, congressional investigations, billions in black budget programs getting exposed. Good, let it burn. And take how many classified operations with it. How many undercover assets get compromised? How many future missions get scrubbed because we can't fund them without oversight? Reeves's voice hardened. Marcus thought he was fighting corruption. He was actually threatening national security, and you're about to do the same. Cass understood then. This wasn't about covering up fraud. It was about protecting something bigger, something Marcus had seen but not fully understood. What do you want from me? The original folder, all copies, and your silence. In exchange, I clear the charges against you and Malik. You both walk away. He gets to spend his mother's last days with her. You get to go back to your cabin and forget any of this happened. And if I refuse, then you go to Leavenworth for espionage. Malik goes into federal custody. His mother dies without seeing him again. And the folder gets classified so deep no one will ever see it. You lose everything and accomplish nothing. It was a good offer. A smart offer. The kind that would make sense to anyone who understood how the world actually worked. But Cass thought about Marcus's last words, the ones she'd never been able to decipher. And suddenly she understood them. Not her fault. My choice. Tell the truth. No deal, she said. Reeves sighed. I was afraid you'd say that. Movement behind Cass. She turned to see two MPs approaching. They had that inevitable quality of people who'd already decided how this was going to end. Sergeant Cassandra Brennan, you're under arrest for theft of classified materials and violations of the Espionage Act. You have the right to remain silent. One of them reached for her arms. Cass didn't resist. Just stood there while they cuffed her and read her rights and led her toward an unmarked vehicle parked at the plaza entrance. Reeves walked beside them. This didn't have to happen. You could have walked away. So could you. I'm protecting my country. You're protecting criminals. Sometimes they're the same thing. They put Cass in the back of the vehicle. Through the window, she could see the Detroit River gray water moving south toward Lake Erie. She thought about currents and destinations and how sometimes you couldn't fight where the water took you. The vehicle started moving. They were taking her somewhere for processing. Federal courthouse, probably. Arraignment, detention, all the machinery of justice grinding forward. But as they pulled out of Hart Plaza, Cass saw something that made her smile. A news van, Channel 7, pulling into the hospital parking lot. The envelope she'd sent to the Free Press must have arrived early. And someone had decided the story was worth investigating. Reeves saw it too. Her expression went carefully blank. Looks like your copies found an audience, Cass said. Won't matter. National security gag order. Judge will seal everything before it gets to trial. Maybe, but the questions are out there now, and questions are harder to bury than answers. They drove in silence after that. Cass watched Detroit roll past the windows, the ruins and the rebuilding, the empty lots and the gardens people planted anyway. A city that refused to die no matter how many times it got knocked down. She thought about Marcus, about the choice he'd made, about whether it was suicide or sacrifice or something that couldn't be reduced to simple words. She thought about Deborah asking her to lie, to give Malik a simple story he could carry. Hero father, clean death, no complications. But the truth was never simple, and maybe that was okay. The vehicle pulled up to the federal courthouse. They let her inside through a side entrance, avoiding cameras. Processing took 3 hours. Fingerprints, photographs, paperwork. A federal defender showed up and told her not to say anything. She nodded and didn't. They put her in a holding cell to await arraignment. The cell was clean but cold. Metal bench, concrete walls, a small window too high to see through. She sat and waited. Around noon, a guard came and unlocked the cell. You've got a visitor. They led her to a conference room. Sitting at the table was a woman she didn't recognize. Late 60s white woman in an expensive suit with a briefcase and an expression that said she'd won more fights than she'd lost. Sergeant Brennan, I'm Margaret Walsh. I represent the Government Accountability Project. We received an envelope this morning containing some very interesting documents. Cass sat down. You work fast. When a dying soldier's widow calls my office and tells me her husband was murdered to cover up Pentagon corruption, I tend to prioritize. Walsh opened her briefcase and pulled out copies of Marcus's notes. Deborah Kane contacted us this morning, said her son brought her these documents, said you and the boy were being hunted by MPs for trying to expose the truth. Is Malik okay? He's with his mother. The MPs tried to take him into custody, but Mrs. Kane's doctor intervened, said moving the boy would cause the patient severe distress. They're allowing him to stay under hospital supervision. Walsh smiled slightly. Dying women have a certain moral authority even federal agents respect. And me? That's more complicated. You're charged with serious crimes. But I think we can fight this, especially if what's in these documents is accurate. It's accurate? Then we have work to do. Walsh pulled out more papers. I've already filed motions with the court, requesting that charges be dropped on whistleblower grounds, arguing that you are acting in the public interest by exposing potential criminal activity. It's not guaranteed to work, but it's a start. Cass felt something loosen in her chest. Not hope exactly, but the absence of certain doom. What about the gag order? Reeves said they'd seal everything. They'll try, but the story's already out. Detroit Free Press ran it this morning. Dead soldiers' notes allege Pentagon corruption. It's spreading. Other outlets are picking it up. Once the public knows sealing it becomes much harder. Reeves won't give up. No, she won't. This is going to be a fight, possibly a long one. Are you prepared for that? Cass thought about the 5 years in the cabin, the isolation, the guilt, the slow erosion of everything that made life worth living. I'm prepared. Good, because Marcus Kane's story deserves to be told, and you're one of the few people left who can tell it. The arraignment happened that afternoon. Federal judge stern and efficient. Walsh argued for release on Cass's own recognizance. The prosecutor argued she was a flight risk. The judge looked at Cass's service record and the fact that she'd voluntarily appeared at Hart Plaza and set bail at $50,000. Jerome posted it, showed up at the courthouse with a bondsman and didn't ask questions. Just signed the papers and walked Cass out into cold November air. You caused quite a commotion, he said. Sorry about that. Don't be. About time someone stood up to these people. He drove her to the hospital. Deborah wants to see you, both of you. The fourth floor was quieter than before. The MPs were gone, just family and hospital staff now. Cass walked to room 312 with her stomach tight. Inside, Deborah looked like she'd aged 10 years in 2 days, but her eyes were clear. Kira sat on the bed beside her coloring. Malik stood by the window looking out at the city. Linda was there too. She gave Cass a look that said they'd talk later, but didn't stop her from entering. Deborah saw her and managed a weak smile. You told him the truth? Yes. And now the whole world's going to know. Probably. Good. Deborah's hand found Malik's. He came and sat beside her. I spent 5 years protecting my children from hard truths. Turns out they're stronger than I gave them credit for. Mom, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I asked Cassandra to lie for me, to give you a simple story about your father. But she was right to refuse. You deserve better than that. Malik's eyes were wet. Dad was trying to do the right thing. He was, and it got him killed. But he knew the risk. He made his choice. Deborah looked at Cass. Thank you for helping Malik find the truth, even though I asked you not to. I'm sorry I didn't do what you wanted. Don't be. I was wrong. Truth is harder than lies, but it's stronger too. Her breathing was labored now. Linda moved closer with the morphine. Will you stay for a while? Cass sat in the chair. As long as you want. They sat together in that small room while afternoon turned to evening. Kira colored and chattered about her day at school. Malik told his mother about Fort Wayne and the chase through the warehouse in Jerome's truck. Deborah listened with her eyes half closed, smiling at the parts that were funny and wincing at the parts that were scary. Like she was memorizing the sound of her son's voice. Around 7, she fell asleep. Linda checked her vitals and shook her head slightly. Not long now, she whispered. Malik held his mother's hand, didn't let go. Cass stood to leave, give them privacy for what came next, but Deborah's eyes opened. Cassandra, I'm here. Marcus's compass, the one at his grave. Will you bring it to me? Now. Tomorrow might be too late. Cass looked at Linda. The nurse nodded. I'll go get it. The drive to the cemetery took 20 minutes. The gates were closed, but she climbed the fence, found Marcus's grave by the beam of her flashlight. The compass was still there, tarnished now from the weather. But when she picked it up, the needle moved, spun once, twice, then settled pointing north, toward the hospital. She drove back through empty streets. The city looked different now. Less like ruins, more like something waiting to be rebuilt. When she got back to the hospital, Deborah was awake again. Malik and Kira on either side of her, Linda monitoring the machines that beeped softly in the background. Cass handed the compass to Deborah. The dying woman held it carefully like it might break. Marcus gave this to you. Before the mission, said I'd need it to find my way home. He was right. Deborah pressed the compass into Malik's hand. This is yours now. Your father wanted Cassandra to find her way. Now she's helping you find yours. Keep it. Remember what it means. Malik stared at the compass, the needle pointing north, towards something he couldn't see yet but might someday find. Deborah looked at Cass one more time. I forgive you. For everything. I need you to know that. I know. Do you forgive yourself? The question hit harder than expected. Cass thought about 5 years of guilt. 5 years of carrying weight that wasn't entirely hers to carry. I'm working on it. Good. Marcus wouldn't want you punishing yourself forever. He'd want you to live. Deborah's voice was getting weaker. Promise me you'll try. I promise. Thank you. Deborah closed her eyes. Her breathing slowed. The machines beeped in changing rhythms. Malik held one hand. Kira held the other. Linda stood behind them, with tears running silently down her face. And Cassandra Brennan, who had killed a man by accident and spent 5 years wishing she'd died instead, watched a family say goodbye to someone they loved. Deborah Kane died at 8:47 on a Tuesday night in November. Her last words were to Kira, too quiet for anyone else to hear. But the little girl smiled and nodded and said, Okay, Mama, I'll tell Daddy you said hi. The funeral was 4 days later. Small service at the cemetery. Friends and family. A few of Marcus's old unit. Cass stood at the back and watched them lower Deborah into the ground beside her husband. The pastor spoke about love and loss and reunion in heaven. About how death wasn't the end, but a door to something better. About faith and hope and the promise of seeing loved ones again. Cass didn't know if she believed any of it, but she hoped it was true. For Malik's sake, for Kira's sake, after the service people gathered at Jerome's house. Food and coffee and the kind of small talk that happens when nobody knows what else to say. Malik found Cass in the backyard. He was holding the compass. They dropped the charges, he said, against you. The prosecutor called it insufficient evidence in the public interest. I heard. Mom's lawyer said the documents you sent out made it too complicated to prosecute. Too many questions about what the army was hiding. Your father's story is going to come out, one way or another. Will it change anything? Cass thought about bureaucracies and cover-ups and how hard it was to hold powerful people accountable. Maybe, maybe not, but at least people will know he tried. Malik opened the compass, watched the needle spin and settle. I'm going to live with Aunt Linda. She and Uncle Jerome are going to adopt me and Kira officially. Make sure we stay together. That's good. What about you? What are you going to do? I don't know yet. She'd thought about going back to the cabin, but the idea of more isolation felt wrong now. Like she'd learned something these past days that made hiding impossible. You could stay in Detroit. There's room at Uncle Jerome's. I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? Because she brought enough trouble to this family. Because Malik needed to grieve his mother without a reminder of his father's death living in the next room. Because she didn't know how to be around people anymore and needed time to relearn. But she didn't say any of that. Just, you need space to heal, so do I. Malik looked disappointed, but nodded. Will you stay in touch? Send me stories about my dad sometimes. As many as you want. He held out the compass. Here. Mom wanted you to have this. She gave it to you. She said to give it to you after she died. Said you'd need it to find your way home. And I think she was right. Cass took the compass. The weight of it felt familiar. Like something that had always belonged in her hand. Thank you. No, thank you for telling me the truth, for not treating me like a kid who couldn't handle it. He went back inside. Cass stood alone in Jerome's backyard, holding Marcus's compass and watching winter clouds move across the Detroit sky. The needle pointed north, always north, towards something steady and true. She didn't know where home was anymore. The cabin felt like a prison now. Detroit felt like someone else's city. She had nowhere that fit. But maybe that was okay. Maybe finding home was the journey, not the destination. She thought about Marcus's last words, the ones she'd finally understood. Not her fault. My choice. Tell the truth. She'd done that. Told the truth even when it hurt. Even when it cost her. And somehow she was still standing. Deborah had asked if she forgave herself. She'd said she was working on it. That was true. But standing here now, holding the compass, watching the needle point steadily north, she felt something shift. Not forgiveness exactly, but acceptance. The understanding that some mistakes can't be fixed, only lived with. That carrying guilt was a choice, same as Marcus calling fire on his position had been a choice. And maybe it was time to choose differently. 3 weeks later, Cass stood at Marcus and Deborah's graves. She'd driven from Appalachia one last time. Brought flowers, white roses for Deborah, American flag for Marcus. She placed them on the stones and knelt in the cold dirt. I told them everything, she said, about Firebase Atlas, about what you found, about why you really died. The Army's fighting it, trying to classify everything. But the story's out there now. People know. The wind moved through the cemetery, carried the smell of coming snow. Malik's doing okay. He's angry. He's sad. But he's got Linda and Jerome. He's got Kira. He'll make it. She pulled the compass from her pocket, set it on Marcus's stone. I'm returning this. You were right, I needed it to find my way home. But I think I've found it now, or at least I know where to look. The needle spun, settled, pointed north, toward Detroit, toward people who needed help, toward a world that was still broken, but maybe could be fixed if enough people tried. I'm going to work with that lawyer, Walsh. She wants me to testify if it goes to trial. Wants me to help other whistleblowers tell their stories. I don't know if I'll be any good at it, but I'm going to try. She stood, brushed dirt from her knees. Thank you for saving my life. I'm sorry it cost you yours. I'm going to try to make it worth something. That's all I can promise. She walked back to her truck, didn't look back, drove out of the cemetery and onto the highway heading north. Not to the cabin. She'd sold that last week. Couldn't live there anymore. Too many ghosts. Instead, she drove to a small apartment in Ann Arbor. 2 rooms, cheap rent, close to Walsh's office. Close to the university where she'd enrolled in classes. Criminal justice. Public policy. Things that might help her understand how to fight systems that protected themselves by crushing people. It wasn't much, but it was forward motion. It was choosing to live instead of just surviving. 6 months later, the case went to trial. Not criminal charges against Cass anymore. Civil lawsuit against the Pentagon. Wrongful death. Fraud. Conspiracy. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, veterans groups, congressional staffers, all watching to see if one dead soldier's notes could take down a billion-dollar black budget operation. Cass testified for 3 days, told them everything about Marcus, about Firebase Atlas, about the chase at Fort Wayne and Deborah's dying wish, and the choice she'd made to tell the truth even when lying would have been easier. The defense tried to destroy her, called her unreliable, PTSD damaged, a disgruntled soldier with an axe to grind. But Walsh had done her homework, brought in witnesses, other soldiers who'd seen irregularities, contractors who'd been paid to look the other way, documents that corroborated Marcus's notes. The trial lasted 8 weeks. The jury deliberated for 4 days. And on a Tuesday morning in May, they came back with a verdict. Guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted. Cass sat very still and felt something release in her chest. Something she'd been carrying so long she'd forgotten it was there. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded them. Walsh gave a statement about justice and accountability and the importance of protecting whistleblowers. Malik was there with Linda and Kira. He'd taken a day off school to watch the verdict. Cass saw him in the crowd, and he nodded once, a silent acknowledgement. We did it. Later that night, Cass sat alone in her apartment and looked at the photographs she'd kept. Marcus and her at the firing range, both grinning like they had all the time in the world. She still didn't know if his death had been tactical genius or suicide or murder. Maybe it was all three. Maybe the truth was too complicated for simple categories. But she knew he'd died trying to do the right thing, and that his story had finally been told. That was enough. She put the photograph away and opened her laptop, started writing. Not a report or a testimony, just memories. Stories about Marcus that Malik might want to read someday. About the man his father had been before he became a martyr or a victim or a headline. About the human being underneath all the mythology. She wrote until dawn, then she slept without nightmares for the first time in 6 years. When she woke, sun was streaming through the window, birds singing outside, the world continuing to turn. Cassandra Brennan got up, made coffee, looked at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Same face, same scar through the eyebrow, but different eyes. Eyes that had seen the worst thing and survived it. Eyes that had chosen truth over comfort and lived with the consequences. Eyes that weren't drowning in crimson anymore. She picked up her phone, scrolled to Malik's number, sent a text. Wrote down some stories about your dad. Want to hear them? The reply came 3 minutes later. Yes, all of them. She smiled, started typing. Outside, Detroit was waking up, broken and rebuilding, scarred and still standing. Like her, like Malik, like everyone who'd ever had to choose between easy lies and hard truths. They'd chosen truth, and somehow against all odds they'd survived. That wasn't redemption, wasn't forgiveness, wasn't anything clean or simple. But it was real, and it was enough. Cassandra Brennan closed her eyes and felt the sun on her face and knew finally that she was home.